Canine dog stopped court proceedings. What happened next shocked everyone. The courtroom was unnaturally silent, the kind of silence that pressed against the walls, heavy and suffocating. The faint creak of wooden benches and the occasional shuffle of papers were the only sounds breaking through the tension that hung in the air like an invisible weight. It was the kind of silence that made people hold their breath, waiting for something to happen. Officer Logan Hayes sat near the front, his uniform crisp, his expression unreadable. His canine partner, Titan, a large German shepherd with sharp amber eyes, sat beside him, his body tense but still, ears perked forward as if listening to something no one else could hear. The courtroom was filled to capacity. Lawyers, reporters, and spectators all packed into the gallery, eyes locked on the judge's bench. At the center of it all sat Judge Samuel Whitmore, an older man with a stern face, his glasses balanced at the tip of his nose. The case in question wasn't just any trial. It was one that had gripped the city for weeks. A high-profile corruption scandal had been uncovered, and one of the most respected officials in law enforcement, District Attorney Martin Holloway, was at the heart of it. Logan wasn't here as a spectator. He had been called as a witness, one of the few honest officers left in a department that had been shaken by the allegations. But despite the weight of the trial, his focus wasn't on the defendant or the lawyers battling it out. His attention kept flickering toward Titan. Something was wrong. Titan was trained for courtroom behavior. Logan had brought him into legal proceedings before. Calm, disciplined, a silent observer. But today there was a difference. The way Titan's muscles tensed beneath his dark coat, the way his nostrils flared as if detecting something out of place, it sent a ripple of unease down Logan's spine. He placed a steadying hand on Titan's back, feeling the powerful dog's body quiver slightly beneath his palm. Titan wasn't just alert, he was on edge. Logan exhaled slowly, trying to shake off his own nerves. It was probably the atmosphere. A packed courtroom, heavy with tension, the scent of sweat and cheap cologne mixing with polished wood and old paper. Titan was just reacting to it, wasn't he? The bailiff cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the stillness. All rise for the Honorable Judge Whitmore. The rustling of clothes and scraping of chairs echoed as everyone stood. The judge nodded, adjusting his robe before lowering himself into the massive chair behind the bench. You may be seated, he said, his voice gravelly with age. The trial resumed. Lawyers launched into their opening arguments, their voices bouncing off the stone walls. But Logan wasn't listening. Titan hadn't moved. His gaze remained fixed, his body tense like a coiled spring. Logan followed his partner's stare, but nothing seemed out of place. Just people, lawyers, jurors, the defendant sitting stiffly at his table. Then Titan's ears twitched. Just once. A small movement, but Logan knew his dog better than he knew most people. It was a silent warning, the kind Titan had given him. In the field before something went terribly wrong. A chill crawled up Logan's spine. He had learned a long time ago to trust Titan's instincts. They had saved his life more than once. He leaned down slightly, his voice barely a whisper. What is it, buddy? Titan didn't break focus. His breathing had changed, slower, deeper, as if he were trying to pick apart something hidden in the air. And then, ever so slightly, he let out a low, nearly imperceptible growl. Logan stiffened. Titan never growled in court. Something was very, very wrong. Logan had been in courtrooms before, testifying, presenting evidence, sitting through endless legal proceedings where criminals either walked free or faced justice. It was all routine, black and white, facts and evidence. But today something felt different. Titan's unease wasn't something Logan could ignore. It was like a whisper in the back of his mind, a quiet warning that kept growing louder with each passing second. He adjusted his posture, scanning the room again, forcing himself to push past the nerves. Titan was here as a witness, in a way. The case against District Attorney Martin Holloway was built on months of investigations, countless reports, and the work of a few honest officers, including Logan. Corruption had run deep in the city's justice system, but Holloway. No one had expected him to be involved. He was a man people trusted. the kind who shook hands with governors and gave speeches about integrity. And yet, the evidence told a different story. Logan had been part of the raid that uncovered illegal transactions, hidden case files, and connections to organized crime, things that Holloway had desperately tried to bury. Logan and Titan had been there the night those files were found, Titan sniffing out a locked compartment filled with documents that could ruin powerful people. That was why they were here. Logan's testimony could put Holloway away for a long time, but Titan had found something back then, something that never made it into the official reports. A sealed envelope, hidden inside a safe, tucked between stacks of cash and ledgers. Logan had barely skimmed its contents before higher-ups had swept in and taken over. His orders had been clear. "You've done your job, Officer Hayes. We'll handle the rest." Except something about that night never sat right with him. Logan had seen Titan detect drugs, explosives, even human remains. But that night, his K9 partner had reacted differently, not to cash, not to weapons, but to that envelope. Logan remembered the way Titan had poured at the safe, whining, alert, as if something was more dangerous than anyone realized. And now, here they were, in court. The prosecution was laying out their case, going through the mountain of evidence against Holloway. Logan knew his turn to testify was coming soon, but something in the judge's expression, the way the defense lawyer sat calmly with his hands folded, made Logan uneasy. This was supposed to be an airtight case. The whole city had waited for this moment, the fall of a corrupt DA. So why did it feel like the outcome had already been decided? He glanced at Titan again. The German shepherd had barely moved, his amber eyes locked on something or someone. His breathing was slow, measured, but Logan knew his dog. Titan wasn't just watching, he was waiting. For what? The courtroom's heavy wooden doors closed with a soft thud as another lawyer entered, walking briskly toward the defense table. The judge barely reacted. The jurors didn't turn their heads, but Titan did. His ears perked, his body stiffened, and his nostrils flared. And that was when Logan knew. This wasn't just a routine case. Something else was happening, something bigger, and Titan could sense it. The trial had just begun. But for Logan and Titan, the real fight was about to start. The courtroom carried the same stiff formality it always did. Polished wood, the scent of old books and coffee, the quiet murmurs of attorneys flipping through case files. The judge listened intently as the prosecution presented its next piece of evidence against District Attorney Martin Holloway. Every detail seemed meticulously planned, every fact lined up like chess pieces on a board. But Titan wasn't listening to any of it. Logan noticed the change immediately, subtle but undeniable. Titan, who had been sitting obediently beside him, had shifted. His ears, normally relaxed but alert, were now rigid. His chest rose and fell in slow, controlled breaths, as if filtering something unseen in the air. And then came the telltale sign, the flick of his nose. Logan's pulse picked up. Titan was tracking something. His K9 partner had done this hundreds of times before, on drug busts, bomb searches, and raids. It was instinct, finely tuned through years of training and real-world danger. Titan never reacted without reason. Never. Logan leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "What is it, buddy?" Titan didn't break his focus. He barely blinked. His gaze was locked on something across the courtroom, something beyond Logan's line of sight. For the first time that morning, Logan felt a sliver of doubt creep into his chest. He knew Titan better than anyone. If his partner was reacting, it meant something was there. But what? The prosecution continued speaking, flipping to another page in the evidence binder. A projected image of seized documents flickered on the screen at the front of the room. The crowd remained still, absorbed in the ongoing testimony. Yet Titan's muscles tightened. His body had shifted into a stance Logan recognized from their time in the field. It wasn't just alertness. It was readiness. Logan followed Titan's line of sight, scanning the room carefully. Nothing looked unusual. The defense team sat stiffly, their expressions blank, occasionally taking notes. Holloway himself appeared composed, hands folded in front of him, his suit impeccable. The jury sat in silence, absorbing the words being spoken. But Titan knew something they didn't. Logan's fingers twitched at his side. He trusted his dog, more than he trusted anyone in this room. Then came the next sign, a sound too soft for most human ears. A faint, almost imperceptible whine from Titan's throat. It lasted no more than a second, but Logan felt it like a hammer to the chest. Titan never whined. Not unless... Logan swallowed hard. His partner wasn't just tracking something, he was warning him. A cold sensation settled in Logan's stomach. Something was wrong. He scanned the room again, this time slower, more methodically. He wasn't looking at expressions anymore. He was looking for behaviors, small things, a tapping foot, a clenched jaw, someone shifting a little too much in their seat. Then he saw it. At the defense table, one of Holloway's legal assistants, a thin, wiry man with graying hair, wiped his brow. Logan wouldn't have thought anything of it. The courtroom was warm under the overhead lights, and this was a high-profile case. Nervousness was normal. But Titan's nose flared again. His focus didn't waver. He was staring right at that man. Logan exhaled slowly. Coincidence? Maybe. But in his line of work, coincidences could get you killed. Titan's posture lowered, his front paws pressing slightly forward, as if preparing to move. Logan's pulse quickened. Easy, he muttered under his breath, gripping the leash a little tighter. Titan wasn't listening. His instincts had taken over. And that was when Logan realized this wasn't just about Holloway anymore. Something else was happening. Something bigger. And Titan had just found it. Logan tightened his grip on Titan's leash, his pulse quickening. His canine partner was locked in place, his amber eyes fixed on the thin, gray-haired man at the defense table. The same man who had just wiped his brow, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Titan's body was taut, muscles coiled like a spring, his breathing deep and measured. This wasn't normal courtroom behavior for him. Logan had seen this reaction before, on the job during raids, in situations that had gone from routine to deadly in a matter of seconds. But this wasn't the field. This was a courtroom, a place of law, rules, and order. Titan didn't care about that. He let out another low whine, his nose flaring as he took in a deep breath. He smelled something. Logan felt his gut tighten. Titan wasn't wrong. He never was. Slowly, Logan turned to the bailiff standing by the judge's bench, a tall man with sharp eyes and a firm stance. If anyone would take this seriously, it would be him. Logan leaned in, keeping his voice low but urgent. Something's off. My K9's detecting something. The bailiff glanced down at Titan, unimpressed. Dog looks fine to me. Logan ground his teeth. They were dismissing him. He's trained to sense threats before they happen. Logan pressed, his voice tight. Drugs, explosives, even human stress responses. If he's reacting, there's a reason. The bailiff sighed, already looking disinterested. This is a corruption trial, Officer Hayes, not a bomb squad operation. Maybe your dog's just picking up on nerves. He gestured vaguely toward the defense table. Half the people in this room have a reason to sweat. Logan clenched his fists. That wasn't it. Titan wasn't reacting to nerves. He had been in dozens of high-pressure situations, interrogations, raids, shootouts. He knew the difference between fear and danger. Logan's gaze flicked back to the gray-haired man. The assistant sat stiffly, his hands folded on the table, his expression blank. But Logan caught something others missed. His fingers trembled. Something inside Logan screamed at him to act. He turned back to the bailiff, speaking more firmly. I need you to clear the courtroom, just for a minute. Let me check Titan's reaction. The bailiff let out a sharp laugh. Clear the courtroom? Do you hear yourself? Nearby, a few reporters and spectators turned their heads, curious about the exchange. Logan's stomach churned. This was slipping away from him. Titan let out a single sharp bark. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Several jurors jumped. The judge's gavel slammed against the desk. "Control your dog, Officer Hayes," Judge Whitmore's voice boomed across the room. Logan hesitated, weighing his options. His training told him to follow protocol, respect authority, but Titan's training told him something far more important. Trust your instincts. And right now, Titan's instincts were screaming. Holloway's defense attorney turned in his seat, smirking. "What's the matter, officer? Dog doesn't—" "Like my client." A few people chuckled under their breath. Logan's jaw tightened. They thought this was a joke. Titan didn't joke. He reacted to threats. And right now, there was one sitting right in front of them. Logan took a deep breath. No one was listening, and that made the unease in his gut grow even deeper. Because if Titan was right, if they were ignoring his warning, then something bad was about to happen. The tension in the courtroom was rising, but no one was taking Titan seriously. Logan could feel it, the way people dismissed the warning signs, the way they smirked and whispered, treating Titan's reaction like an inconvenience instead of the red flag it was. Titan, however, didn't care about protocol. He cared about the truth. The German shepherd's body was rigid, his amber eyes locked onto the gray-haired legal assistant sitting at the defense table. His chest rose and fell in steady, controlled breaths, his ears flicking forward as he detected something Logan still couldn't see. And then Titan moved, fast. Before Logan could react, his K9 partner lunged forward, jerking the leash from his grip. The force of it sent a shock through Logan's system. Titan had never done that before. Not once. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as chairs scraped against the floor, papers fluttering from the prosecution's desk. The sudden motion startled the jury, and even Judge Whitmore jolted upright, slamming his gavel down. "Control that dog, Officer Hayes," the judge's voice boomed. But Logan barely heard him. Titan wasn't attacking. He was exposing something. The K9 sprinted past Holloway and his attorneys, stopping directly in front of the legal assistant. The same man Titan had been fixated on since the start of the hearing. The man's eyes went wide as Titan barked, loud, relentless, and sharp. Not just a warning. A signal. Titan's front paws lifted slightly, his claws scraping the wooden floor as he lunged toward the assistant's leg, grabbing hold of his pants. Not with aggression, with intent. The courtroom erupted into chaos. "Get that dog off me!" the man shouted, his voice cracking as he stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. Logan surged forward, his instincts screaming. Titan had found something. "Titan, heel!" Logan commanded, his voice firm, but his partner didn't let go. The K9 wasn't attacking, he was revealing. And then Logan saw it. As the assistant struggled, something small and metallic slipped from his jacket pocket, tumbling onto the floor with a dull clink. A flash drive. Logan's breath hitched. What the hell? For a split second, the entire courtroom froze. Titan released his grip, stepping back, his tail stiff, his body still locked in an alert stance. The assistant's face drained of color. He looked down at the object, then up at the judge, his mouth opening as if scrambling for an explanation. But it was too late. Logan was already moving. He crouched, scooping up the flash drive before the man could react. He barely had time to examine it before he heard the unmistakable sound of hurried footsteps. The assistant bolted. "Hey, stop him!" Logan shouted, but he didn't need to. Titan was already on it. The K9 launched forward, cutting the man off before he even reached the exit. With precise, practiced speed, Titan leapt, knocking him off balance, sending him crashing to the floor. More shouts erupted. The bailiffs rushed in, pinning the man down as he gasped, his breath ragged, his hands scrambling against the polished wood. And in the middle of it all, Titan stood tall, chest heaving, eyes locked onto Logan. Because whatever was on that flash drive was something nobody in that courtroom was supposed to see. The courtroom was in chaos. Bailiffs rushed to restrain the assistant, who was now pinned against the floor, his face twisted in panic. The prosecution team whispered furiously among themselves, while members of the jury exchanged bewildered glances. Even the usually unshakable Judge Whitmore had lost control of the room, his gavel raised but hesitating to strike. But Logan wasn't. focused on any of them. His attention was on Titan, who still stood firm, his body tense, his breathing slow and measured. His sharp amber eyes weren't on the assistant anymore. They were locked onto someone else. Logan's pulse quickened. Titan had never been wrong, not once. And now he had turned his focus away from the man who had dropped the flash drive to someone else sitting at the defense table. Martin Holloway. The E. Former district attorney sat frozen, his hands clenched together on the polished surface of the desk. He hadn't moved since Titan's outburst, but Logan saw it now. The way his jaw was set just a little too tightly, the way a single bead of sweat rolled down the side of his face, despite the cool temperature of the room. Titan let out a low, warning growl. Logan's breath caught in his throat. The courtroom noise faded. For a moment it was just the three of them. Logan, Titan, and the man who had built his entire career on being untouchable. Holloway swallowed, shifting in his seat, trying to appear unaffected. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, shaking. His voice was firm, but there was an unmistakable edge of something else beneath it. Fear. Logan's grip on the flash drive tightened. He didn't know what was on it yet, but Titan did. Titan knew something no one else did. Judge Whitmore finally slammed his gavel down. "Enough," he barked. The courtroom noise died down instantly. "Officer Hayes, control your dog and explain what in the hell is happening here." Logan hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to tread carefully, but his gut and Titan told him there was no more time for caution. He took a step forward, his voice clear and unwavering. "Titan's not just reacting. He's identifying a threat." Holloway let out a humorless laugh. "A threat?" He gestured around the room. "In case you've forgotten, officer, I'm the one on trial here. What exactly are you accusing me of?" Titan growled again. This time it was louder. Logan met Holloway's gaze head-on. This was it, the moment that could change everything. He raised the flash drive slightly, his voice measured but firm. "I don't know what's on here yet, but I do know this. Titan hasn't been wrong once in his entire career, and right now he's looking at you." A hush fell over the room. For the first time, Holloway didn't have a response. His fingers twitched against the desk, his eyes darting toward the bailiffs as if already calculating an escape. Titan let out a single sharp bark. And in that moment, Logan knew. The real trial was only just beginning. For a moment, the courtroom was silent. Then, like the crack of a dam breaking, the objections poured in. "This is outrageous," Holloway's lead attorney, Daniel Vaughn, shot up from his seat, his face red with anger. "Your Honor, this officer is disrupting the proceedings with baseless accusations." Judge Whitmore's expression hardened. He turned to Logan, his voice sharp. "Officer Hayes, you better have a damn good explanation for this." Logan didn't flinch. His grip on the flash drive remained firm, and beside him, Titan stood unwavering, his amber eyes still locked onto Holloway. "I do, Your Honor," Logan said, his voice controlled but unyielding. "My K-9 partner has identified something, or someone, as a threat. He has never made a false call, not once." "Since when does the court take orders from a dog?" Vaughn scoffed, shaking his head. "This is absurd. My client is a decorated public servant, not some criminal hiding explosives under his desk." Logan clenched his jaw. "Titan isn't trained just to find bombs. He detects stress responses, deception and danger, things most people miss." His eyes flicked to Holloway, who still hadn't spoken, his knuckles white against the desk. "And right now, he's reacting to your client." Laughter rippled through the spectators, nervous, uncertain. Even some jurors exchanged uneasy glances. Judge Whitmore sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "This is a court of law, not a dog kennel," he muttered, then looked at Logan. "You're telling me that your dog's reaction is reason enough to derail this case?" Logan exhaled sharply. Titan reacted to something this man was carrying. He lifted the flash drive. Something that wasn't meant to be found. Vaughn's smirk faltered. "Just for a second. Then he quickly recovered, waving a dismissive hand. "Your Honor, there is absolutely no proof that this device contains anything relevant. This officer is grasping at straws, and we are wasting the court's time." Logan stepped forward. "Then let's see what's on it." That changed everything. The room tensed. The bailiff shifted slightly. The court stenographer paused mid-typing. Even the jury, who had been instructed to remain neutral, leaned in just a little. Because if the drive contained nothing, Holloway's team should be the first ones demanding to see it. Instead, Vaughn cleared his throat and turned to the judge, his tone measured but urgent. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Any evidence presented must first be reviewed by the proper channels. We can't allow some random piece of technology to dictate this trial." Logan's jaw tightened. "That's exactly what you're afraid of, isn't it?" Holloway's eyes flicked up at him for the first time. There it was, a crack, a hesitation. Titan's growl rumbled deep in his chest, low and steady. A warning. Judge Whitmore sighed, his patience clearly thinning. He stared at the flash drive. In Logan's hand, tapping his gavel against the desk as if weighing his options. Then his gaze settled on Holloway, a long, assessing look. Finally, he spoke. "Bailiff," he said slowly, "take the flash drive into evidence. We'll determine its relevance soon enough." Logan clenched his fists. They were stalling. Titan had uncovered something big. And now, powerful people were trying to make sure it never saw the light of day. But Logan wasn't about to let that happen, because if Titan was right, then this case wasn't just about corruption anymore. It was about the truth. And someone in that courtroom was willing to bury it, no matter the cost. Logan watched as the bailiff took the flash drive from his hand, slipping it into a sealed evidence bag. A low, unsettled murmur spread through the courtroom. Titan sat beside him, still as stone, but his amber eyes never left Holloway. Logan had seen his canine partner react to drugs, weapons, even explosives before, but this was different. This wasn't about physical danger. This was something deeper, something hidden. Judge Whitmore exhaled, rubbing his temple. "Given the circumstances," he said, his voice heavy with reluctance, "this court will temporarily recess while this device is reviewed." Holloway's defense attorney, Daniel Vaughn, was on his feet in an instant. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. That evidence was not submitted through proper channels. Neither was corruption in this office," Logan cut in, his voice firm. He looked directly at Vaughn, then at Holloway. The truth was right in front of them. They were just hoping no one would see it. The judge let out a slow breath, then nodded toward the prosecution. "Have your forensic team check the drive. We'll reconvene in 1 hour." With a sharp strike of the gavel, the courtroom erupted into chaos. Logan didn't wait. As the judge left the bench and the jury was ushered out, he pushed through the small crowd gathering near the prosecution table. Titan stayed at his side, his muscles still tense. He wasn't letting this go. A truth no one was meant to see. Minutes later, Logan stood in a back office with Assistant District Attorney Melissa Carter, a woman who had been fighting against Holloway's corruption for months. Her forensic tech had already plugged the flash drive into a secure laptop. The screen flickered to life. "What exactly are we looking for?" Melissa asked, arms crossed. Titan sat beside Logan, his ears forward, as if he too was waiting for the answer. Logan exhaled. "Anything that tells us why Titan reacted to this man, and why Holloway's." People looked ready to bury it. The room fell silent as the first set of files appeared on screen. Transactions. A series of bank transfers, moving large sums of money through offshore accounts. Melissa stiffened. This isn't just bribery. This is..." She clicked. On another file, more documents appeared. Names, dates, case files that had mysteriously disappeared over the last 5 years. Chill ran down Logan's spine. Some of these names weren't just criminals. Some were witnesses, officers, people who had mysteriously resigned, disappeared, or in some cases, died. Melissa's face paled. "Logan, this is a kill list." Logan swallowed hard. His eyes flicked to Titan, who sat perfectly still, watching, waiting. He had known. Somehow, he had known. The door behind them creaked open, and the forensic tech rushed in, his face tense. "You need to see this." He tapped the screen, opening one final document. A simple ledger. At the top, in bold black letters, was the name Martin Holloway. Beneath it, payment after payment, from organized crime families, from corporations under investigation, from men who had been released from prison under mysterious circumstances. Melissa let out a slow, shaky breath. He wasn't just covering for criminals. She turned to Logan, her voice barely above a whisper. He was running the entire operation. Logan's fingers curled into fists. The man who was supposed to uphold the law had been selling justice to the highest bidder. Titan let out a single sharp bark. And in that moment, Logan knew. They weren't just exposing corruption. They were about to bring down the most powerful man in the room. The courtroom had emptied, but Logan's pulse was still pounding in his ears. He stood in a dimly lit office, the sterile glow of a computer screen flickering against the walls. Titan sat beside him, still as stone. The K-9 had been trained to detect explosives, drugs, and danger, but this was something else, something deeper. Across the desk, Assistant District Attorney Melissa Carter leaned forward, her jaw tight as she watched her forensic tech work on decrypting the files from the flash drive Titan had uncovered. "This better be something," Melissa muttered, "because if we just stalled a corruption trial over nothing, the judge will—" She stopped mid-sentence. The first file had opened. A single bank transaction log filled the screen. Logan narrowed his eyes, scanning the numbers. Offshore. Accounts. Wire transfers. Large sums of money shifting through shell companies with no real names attached. And then a name appeared. Martin Holloway. Logan stiffened. His grip on the edge of the desk tightened. Melissa clicked on another folder. More documents filled the screen. Legal case files, sealed cases that should have been locked away, but instead, they were here. Some of the names in the files weren't just criminals. Some were victims, some were officers, some were witnesses, all connected to high-profile cases that Holloway himself had prosecuted or covered up. Melissa sucked in a sharp breath. "Logan, this isn't just corruption. This is—" She clicked another file, a ledger, and in it, every payout, every case, every time justice had been bought and sold like a cheap commodity. It wasn't just bribes. It was control. The cases that should have put dangerous men away, Holloway had buried them. The people who spoke out against him, they had disappeared. A chill crawled up Logan's spine. His eyes flicked down to Titan, who hadn't moved, his ears still perked forward, his gaze still locked onto the screen. Melissa turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. He wasn't just covering for criminals. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the endless pages of transactions, silencing each breathless realization before it could fully settle. Finally, she looked at Logan. Holloway was running. The entire operation. The words hit like a hammer. Logan had spent his whole career fighting corruption, chasing men like Holloway, believing that the system could still work. But the man who was supposed to uphold the law had been the one, selling it to the highest bidder. Titan let out a low, steady growl, not out of fear, not out of warning, out of certainty. Logan clenched his jaw, his hands curled into fists. They weren't just uncovering a scandal, they were about to take down the most powerful man in the room. The courtroom was packed again, but this time, the energy was different. Tension crackled in the air like a storm about to break. The jurors sat stiffly, whispering among themselves. Spectators leaned forward, sensing that something big was about to happen. Even Judge Whitmore, a man who had presided over hundreds of cases, looked uneasy as he adjusted his glasses. At the front, Martin Holloway sat with his defense team, his face carefully composed, but Logan could see it now. The tightness in his jaw, the way his fingers tapped restlessly against the desk. The mask was cracking. Titan sat at Logan's side, still focused, watching. The bailiff approached the judge, a USB drive in his gloved hand, the same drive Titan had exposed in the courtroom earlier. Judge Whitmore gave a curt nod. Prosecution, have you reviewed the contents? Assistant District Attorney Melissa Carter stood. Yes, Your Honor. She turned to the jury, her voice clear, unwavering. What we found changes everything. She stepped toward the evidence screen. This flash drive contained financial records, secret case files, and evidence that implicates Martin Holloway in not just bribery, but orchestrating the release of known criminals in exchange for money. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Melissa continued. He didn't just protect criminals, he ran the operation. He made sure key witnesses disappeared. He controlled law enforcement from the inside. She turned toward Holloway now, her voice sharp. Every case you ever worked was for sale. Holloway let out a breathless chuckle. This is ridiculous, he muttered, shaking his head. Melissa ignored him. She clicked on a file. A ledger appeared on screen. Dozens of payments. Offshore accounts, bribes. And then a list of names. Logan scanned them, his chest tightening. Some of them were familiar. Some were officers. Some were people who had vanished. And one name made the entire courtroom go silent. Judge Samuel. Whitmore. The judge froze. His hands tightened around the gavel. And for the first time, Titan moved. He stood up, muscles tight, ears pinned forward, his sharp gaze locking onto the man presiding over the trial. A murmur spread across the room. No one spoke, but everyone understood. The corruption didn't stop at Holloway. It went higher. Logan's stomach twisted. How deep did this go? Judge Whitmore opened his mouth, but no words came out. His own name was on the list. Holloway. Seeing the judge's reaction, let out a small bitter laugh. He leaned back, shaking his head. Well, well, he muttered. Looks like I wasn't the only one getting paid. The entire courtroom was unraveling. The jury exchanged stunned glances. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks. The bailiff took a cautious step forward, glancing at the judge, unsure of what to do. And Titan let out a single, sharp bark. It was enough. Enough to remind Logan why they were here. Enough to cut through the chaos and force the truth into the open. Judge Whitmore exhaled slowly, shoulders sagging. He looked at Logan, then at the evidence. Then, without another word, he reached for his gavel. A long pause. Then, this court is adjourned. The trial was over. But the real fight for justice had just begun.